main reason I wanted to talk a little bit about the Clayton Act was another reason, and maybe the real reason for the Clayton Act, was to exempt unions from the Sherman Act, because the labor union movement was really growing, and the Sherman Act was now being used against labor unions. After all, part of the Sherman Antitrust Act was that companies could not collude with one another to fix prices. They needed to compete. You couldn't get several companies all coming together and agreeing, hey, this is the price we're going to charge for our products, because the government wanted all these companies competing and not just agreeing among themselves to have a high price that would hurt the consumer. Well, think about what labor unions do. Labor unions is where workers collude with one another to fix prices. Instead of competing against each other and offering lower prices to employers, which would be wages, they want to all collude, and they want to go to the employer and say, hey, here's this one high price, and you have to pay everybody this high price. And in fact, the workers are coming together and they're saying, look, we can't compete with one another because that's going to drive wages down. Just like when businesses compete, it drives prices down. The workers said, we don't want to compete with each other, and who's going to work for the lowest price? Let's all come together in this labor monopoly, and we're going to go to our employer and say, hey, here's the price we've all agreed on, and you've got to pay this, and nobody is going to work for you for less money. You've got to pay this monopoly price. So really, what labor unions were doing is exactly what the Sherman Act said you couldn't do. And so what happened with Clayton is they specifically exempted labor unions from antitrust. They said, no, unions can do that. Businesses can't collude to raise prices, but it's okay for workers to collude to raise wages. Because after all wages are prices. They're the price of labor. But for some reason, it's bad for businesses to gouge consumers with high prices, but it's okay for workers to gouge their employers with high wages. Oh, and by the way, if workers are gouging their employers with high wages, the employers pass on those high wages to their customers. So the customers are being indirectly gouged by the labor unions. But apparently, the politicians think it's fine if labor unions gouge customers. They just don't want the employers to gouge the customers directly. So it's really not about the customers, because at the end of the day, the customer is still getting gouged.
The Peter Schiff Show.